whole society has been involved in a culture war at least since, I don't know. I mean, probably for the past 60 years. And, since the 60s. And that culture war has taken on different issues at different times. But, in 1993, Pat Buchanan is at the Republican convention talking about how disgusting it is that or maybe I guess it was Dan Quayle who was the vice president nominee at the time, like how disgusting it was that Murphy Brown was having a child out of wedlock. For those of you youngs, Murphy Brown's not a real person. Murphy Brown was a sitcom character. Okay? I mean, so this cancel culture has been going on, or at least like this cultural fight. The cancel part of it that has been going on is like, I don't know. Why didn't I get this job? Well, it was because you came in with your hair too long, or you came in and, you wrote about this somewhere. We're not going to tell you. We're not going to broadcast it. It's just that, like, the power has been democratized as to who gets to succeed in society and why.
Yeah. So there were two questions there, but first I'm very curious about which of Matt's appearances on the show this was and what he thought he was going to argue with me about. But going to have to get some clarification from that.
This was
later.
This was your appearance on our show, Ben.
Sorry. It was your appearance on Left Reckoning. Sorry.
Left Reckoning. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Just like to keep track of that. Whether Matt should be allowed back in the show. So, yeah, I think. I think on the newness, question. I think the issue is really what we're talking about. And I would actually also separate out two different things, which is one of them is the general phenomenon of, what's sometimes called cancel culture, or I feel like a slightly older and maybe more accurate term was call out culture, which is something that infects, the entire political spectrum. And so that's one issue. And then the other issue is how it affects the left, which is what I care about as a leftist who wants the left to be more effective, which is the focus that article in Jacobin you were referring to. We can't cancel our way into a better world, and is of course the focus of the book. So on that first question, this sort of general canceling trends in the larger culture, and how new they are. I don't think it's a binary thing, right? Like either this is totally without precedent, or there's like nothing new or different, right? So I would argue that there are a lot of different factors that have come together to make it more of a problem in the last several years. So like, for example, the thing that I mentioned at the beginning of the article about Jeopardy, where you had 450 former Jeopardy contestants who signed this open letter denouncing a current winner for making a gesture with his fingers to indicate they'd won 3 times, which to them looked like something that it's, some people say is a white supremacist thing, although there's Snopes says it's usually, not. It's just a normal gesture that everybody makes. And I think that's something, maybe you disagree. I would have a very hard time imagining like hundreds of normie Jeopardy contestants, getting together on something like that in like the 1990s. But
I'm sorry. That to me seems like a technological issue, right? I mean, it's just like, I mean, because I know on the right they were doing that in the 90s. It's just that they were doing it through churches or through direct mailers. I mean, they were. There's no. I mean, all my examples are from like 2005, but like Lenny the Shark is teaching kids how to be trans. I mean, this was a real thing in whatever that kids movie was. I mean,
your examples are kind of on the of people on the right.
Yeah, no, they were doing this on the right because they had the organizational structure to do it. They had churches. This was happening. It wasn't. Yeah. I mean, Jeopardy contestants probably wouldn't do it, but they would have no way of getting in touch with each other. Now,
yeah, so I do agree with you that part of the difference is technological, and I think that the technology makes a difference in a couple ways. one of them, sure, is just ease of communication, but another one is that I think that social media platforms are designed to be as addictive as at all possible. They're for-profit platforms. This is none of it, controversial, I think. And in particular, I think that the feedback loops that are built into them tend to reward our canceliest impulses. So an example I often think of is from last year when Wendell Potter, who, for people who aren't familiar with him, was a former health insurance executive who had a come to Jesus moment about the issue, many years back, and has since devoted his life to fighting for single payer. And he tweeted something that was a very typical Wendell Potter tweet. It's like, the fact that people don't realize how much Medicare for All would help us during the pandemic is really a sign of how much, how people believe the lies that I told when I was a health insurance executive. He's tweeted stuff like this nonstop for years. And somebody quote tweeted that, presumably having no idea who he was, and said, "Oh my God, this blanking piece of blank, blanking admitted it." And that had gotten 75,000 likes before enough people told him who Wendell Potter was that he took it down. And my point isn't that this particular person, who tweeted it should do better, although, it's that, why didn't he? Right? Because he could have. It would have taken 3 seconds to click on Wendell Potter's name at the top of the tweet, see his Twitter bio, and see all the single payer stuff there. The reason he didn't, I think the feedback loop that's built into it, is you get that little endorphin rush of likes and retweets for throwing the first stone in something like this. And so it really rewards it. I think if you put that together with the fact that we live in a neoliberal hellscape where people are incredibly atomized, they often feel most connected to each other online. And you put that together with the fact that most Americans work in at-will workplaces, non-unionized. So doxing is is like a very potent threat. I think that all of that stuff adds up to make this much more toxic and a much bigger problem, again, for everybody. I mean, I think that, you can trivially easily find examples all over the political spectrum of this happening. But what I'm concerned with, and maybe this takes us to your second question, the sort of, was it the meme question, why not both? I think that the problem from my perspective, is that, oftentimes the way that it plays out in the left is that we're way, way too quick to believe the worst possible interpretation of what each other do, that because the party line from so many people is, cancellation, smanchulation, nothing to see here. So we don't even see it as a problem when we do it. And I think that makes it, I think that creates a toxic atmosphere that's very unappealing to a lot of people that we might otherwise win over. And I think that makes it harder to build solidarity for those larger goals. I think it makes people more likely to burn out.
So why is this, I'm just, a lot of this is based in social media critique, right? So, can you expand it to a larger critique of, culture? Does this exist outside of, Twitter or which is a huge part of it, I understand. And I think your point about the dopamine hits of likes mixed in with the dopamine hits of I'm better than, Louis C.K. or something like that. That is probably quite addictive to people. But outside of social media, is it cancel culture then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, I do think part of the problem comes from the structure of social media itself, although that's also a big problem. I think it's way too easy to say, whatever, log off, don't worry about it, go for a run. But of course, in 2021, social media, the internet in general, is a huge part of where political education, political discussion, even political organizing takes place. We just finished a year where that was the only place that it could take place outside of rare exceptions. So I think that's a real problem, even to the extent that it is. I'm not convinced that it is solely confined to that, though, because I think that if you look, for example, at ways that it spills over into real life with people getting fired and stuff, if you look at the way that, like the Barbara Ehrenreich example I give in the Jacobin piece, that you had like Time magazine, sort of casually repeating, the sort of most harsh version of the accusation against her. I do think that's a problem in real life, and I want to just make one real quick point about this, which is that so far what we've mostly been talking about is this general cultural problem and how it might infect the left. But I think that there's also an element of this that is something that there's a problem. There's something else that's at play here, which is more specific to us, which is that for so long, any kind of option to the left of liberalism has been so far out into the wilderness in American political life that before basically 2015. That was like, people like Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn spent most of their lives as very marginal backbenchers. Anything more radical than that was completely off the table. And I think in that environment, it's very easy to start to think of left politics less as a serious project to change the world than as a kind of symbolic moral stand against the world that we're living in right now. And I think that can be bad in a lot of ways that I talk about in the book. But I think that one way is that it can lead people to get much more cancelly with each other on the left, because if all you're really doing is exhibiting your moral commitments, then it can be very easy to let that shade into spending all of your time interrogating whether everybody else is really sufficiently morally committed. I mean, I heard, Sam Seder was an effing sellout, like that we should, like that there is, I think that there is a lot of that comes out of those sort of pathologies of powerlessness. And what I'm worried about is that when we're suffering from that already on the left, and also there are these sort of general trends because of technological change, because I would argue neoliberalism, it adds up to a really toxic cocktail that I think even in petty examples, like people yelling at each other at the DSA convention because one of them says hey guys, don't make loud noises, because some people might have noise sensitivity, and somebody else says, oh my God, he just said hey guys, that's gendered language, don't do that. That's not something that I think makes us look like a club that most people want to join. And I'm concerned about that because I want everybody to join the club because I want us to win. I
want to just put a pin in that second part because I really do think that is actually the sort of the most fertile and interesting ground. And I think the first part about the Wendell Potter thing, that to me is like to call that cancel culture, that the problem there is cancel culture, I think is, it is, the term becomes really unhelpful because, like, for instance, when Mike Cernovich essentially created a firestorm about a tweet that I had 9 years earlier, that was in response to, I think most people know this story, but it was in response to a Roman Polanski. There were people, I was more associated with the entertainment industry at that time, just in terms I had more relationships. Friends I knew had signed a petition by 100 directors to essentially allow a Roman Polanski come back in the country and get like a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Oscars or something, despite the fact that he had been out of the country on the lam, as it were, for the rape of a 13-year-old girl. And I wrote it at the time, a satirical tweet that was to the effect, I don't quote it, but I think it's probably pretty close. Like, I don't care about Polanski. I just hope that if my daughter is ever raped, it is by an older man with a great sense of mise en scène. And Mike Cernovich paid Jack Posobiec to dig through my tweets. They searched the term rape. That's all they could find. They put that out there. It was retweeted by Donald Trump Jr. and Seb Gorka, and it got me essentially fired from MSNBC for a couple of days. But the bottom line is, like, that to me was not cancel culture. That was some guy weaponizing what public, doing what is this era's version of a public smear campaign. And when you tell me the Wendell Potter story, that's an idiot. That